Hi, everybody. Mary Rowe from the Canadian Urban Institute in Ontario, where it's actually 6 in the evening, and I'm joined by panelists here who are on different time zones and in different weather conditions, which they're going to tell you about it when I ask them to speak. But the interesting thing is what sticks us together, and what I think has been so fantastic about the city experience is that we are all in urban environments, and we are all having similar but very particular challenges through the COVID period, and being reminded how critically important shared life and shared space is in city environments. So this session is particularly important because it's talking about libraries as the new squares. I'm sure every librarian who's watching is going to say, well, wait, this isn't new. We're not the new public square. We've been the public square for a long time, but I think other people are starting to appreciate this. And just like the Joni Mitchell song goes, don't it always seem to you don't know what you got till it's gone. We've had in different parts of the world libraries closed down for extended periods over the last several months, and I think it's really brought into show for people how important these facilities are. But of course, the libraries are changing, and that's part of what Jonathan and Margaret and Kim are here to talk to you about the mechanics of that, the challenges of that, the realities of that. And as I mentioned, I'm in Toronto, where the Urban Institute is headquartered, although we work across the country. And it's the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it's home to many diverse First Nations now, including Inuit and Métis peoples from across what they call Turtle Island. Toronto was covered by a treaty, Treaty 13, with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and by the Williams Treaties that were signed with multiple Anishinaabeg nations. And I should just say that through the pandemic, I'm sharply reminded of the extent to which urbanism, as it's been practiced in the last century, has continued to systemically exclude people, and that we have to come to terms with the legacy of that, and the way in which systemic racism and exclusion have diminished and minimized the effectiveness of our cities. So this is something we've come to terms with and reckon in our past, and we've got to figure out how to move it forward in a different kind of way, in a different kind of communion with diversity and with all people, because cities work and all people are engaged. And I think libraries are such a critical part of that equation. And so I'm really pleased to have these three with me to talk about that. So we're going to start. Sullivan, who is Margaret Sullivan Studios and works around North America, I think, or maybe only in the US, Margaret, but I want to get you to Canada.
It's
yeah. And, when you hear about the weather that Kate's you're going to want to really come quickly to Canada when you hear what Calgary's got today. But anyway, just to say that Margaret is a pro at this. We first met a number of years ago. I was working and living in the US on a project called Reimagining the Civic Commons. And we were starting to have a conversation about these shared amenities, libraries, community centers, parks, and how could we see those differently, see them as infrastructure and see them as merit public investment, because they were so critical to the way cities work. And so I'm glad that we've stayed in touch and that we continue to talk to one another about this, because libraries are critical in Canada, they're critical in Europe, they're critical in the US. So I'm going to turn to you to walk us through a little bit your perspective, libraries as new public squares. Please, Margaret, the floor is yours on the world city stage.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. At 6 o'clock in the evening. I'm in New York City, although I see someone's, Robin is from Greenville, South Carolina, where I'm originally from. So it's nice to see you here with us. I am Margaret Sullivan. I lead a firm called Margaret Sullivan Studio, which for the past 6 years has been devoted to strategy and design of the public library of our 21st century. We have worked with over 40 library systems all over the country and transformed over 4 million square feet of public space. We believe that the public library should be driven from our community's voices, and that the public library is a radical instrument for community change and transformation, to be designed to create places for all styles of learners to flourish. So I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation with our esteemed panelists. And Mary, I'll hand it back over to you to introduce everyone else.
I'm just muting myself and then trying to unmute. Joining next to Margaret is Jonathan Smith, who is from sunny San Antonio. I didn't actually ask Margaret to give a weather report of New York, but what is the temperature in New York? Just give us
It is muggy.
Muggy, yes, it's muggy here in Ontario too. All right, Jonathan, make us eat our hearts out. What is the temperature in San Antonio? And then tell us a little bit about your practice, if you could. Is Lake Flato, am I saying it right, the firm's name, Lake?
Yes, I'm with Lake Flato Architects. I'm associate partner there, and it is about 84 degrees today in San Antonio.
Rough.
So I just sort of wanted to start with some questions. Who goes to libraries anymore? Why don't we just buy everyone in the city a Kindle? And finally, and most often, why on earth are we building a second homeless shelter? These are just a sampling of the questions I got constantly during my 11,000 hours as Lake Flato's project architect on the Austin Central Library. Luckily, as you can see here, the outcome has really changed many of those perceptions with Austin's large 6-story atrium, which fulfilled the project goals of being the best daylit library in the country while creating a new civic living room for the city of Austin. Its teen space hosts gaming competitions and 3D printers. Its literary themed cocktails like Tequila Mockingbird in the library cafe. Its co-working spaces around the atrium that are welcoming the next generation of startups. And its programming. The library hosts everything from weddings to cooking demonstrations to city staff trainings to South by Southwest and right now to voting. Many of these events pay into the library's general fund and help sustain its bottom line. The LEED Platinum Austin Central Library is 200,000 square feet, $94 million, and it has transformed what was once an empty downtown brownfield site into a vibrant civic anchor for the new Seaholm neighborhood that's growing up around it. In addition to the urban context, the site also connects users to nature. The site overlooks Shoal Creek and Lady Bird Lake. And here you can see the outdoor reading porches that are really inspired by Austin's love of the outdoors. These draw visitors to connect with nature. And the porches are all tucked away so that they capture the breezes off of the lake. The outdoor spaces at Austin are the most popular in the building, and they are the first to fill up each morning. But it's not enough just to simply create beautiful space. The building really needs to perform. We track all of our projects post-occupancy, and I am most proud of the fact that the library in its first 2 years of operation has seen an over 300% increase in visitation over the previous library, while also at the same time maintaining a 50% reduction in calls concerning misconduct. The public and all of the public in Austin has really embraced the building, and it has really become the social hub that we all hoped for. The people who used to ask me why a library now ask me, why isn't the library bigger? To switch gears, not every city is as hot and hyped as Austin, Texas right now, and I hope I'm allowed to say that because I'm from Austin. Most cities are not, but this kind of transformational public architecture in the form of a library is possible all across the country. And recently I had the pleasure of working on the new library for the rural community of Medina, Texas. Medina is an unincorporated town with a population hovering around 600 people in the Texas Hill Country. And after all our community meetings, it was clear that Medina needed more community space for events and a space for the high school, Go Medina High Bobcats, where they could teach a culinary arts class. So we designed a highly flexible indoor-outdoor event venue as the addition to Medina, Texas's library. And I'm confident that this library, which is opening soon, will be just as impactful for the city of Medina as the new library has been for Austin. As you can see, I'm super passionate about creating high-performing, transformational public architecture, especially libraries, and I'm very excited to be here with you today and thrilled to talk with my distinguished panelists. Thanks.
I think Mary's introducing me. I'm going to just take the baton, Mary. I think you're on mute. So I will start talking. I'm Kate. Thanks, Mary. Kate Thompson from Calgary, Alberta. And as Mary wanted a bit of a weather report, if I had a green screen behind me, I'd show you a big snowy day in Calgary today. And the weather tomorrow is supposed to be a low of minus 18 Celsius, and I did a quick little Google search. I think that's minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit for the rest of those in sunnier climates. So it's wonderful here, and you have to have robust clothing to work here and live here. Anyways, I'm very happy to be on this panel. and talking about this beloved project that I had the good fortune of working on from 2013 to 2018. This is the Calgary new Central Library, no longer new, actually quite a fixture in our neighborhood. Quite a first for Calgary, one of the biggest public infrastructure buildings to be built since the 1988 Olympics here in Calgary. And it was a feat, as you can see. I'll just pause on this slide for a little bit. Constructed over an active, our biggest commuter train, light rail transit in Calgary. So it was a rising, curving train that merges underground at the one end and exposes itself to the rest of the downtown. Quite a process for this project. Situated in East Village, Calgary, an area of about 100 acres that Calgary Municipal Land Corporation, which I have the good fortune of working with, was charged with revitalizing and redeveloping, and this became one of the anchor developments in the area that has had a transformational effect within the area. The area for years prior to 2007, when we started working here, was blighted with lack of development and not cited as the safest or first place you'd want to visit in Calgary. And now is exactly just that, the place where you bring your friends, you bring your family that have come into the city, and now you also come to the library, which when I hearing you, Jonathan, there are so many similarities between that 5-year period in my life at every party I was at or every event. Why a library? Aren't books dead? All of these questions, and I don't get asked that at all anymore, because this is not a library, or it is what the library used to be, which was a gathering place and a place for an exchange of ideas. And this is what we've created. Some people call it more of our community center or community hub, and that's exactly what it's become for Calgarians. Just some shots on the inside of it. It's about 240,000 square feet, $245 million project. That's Canadian funds for those who aren't in Calgary, in Canada. And I think we actually, Jonathan, we share some common artists between Austin and ourselves. I believe you have some Christian Moeller pieces, as do we, on the exterior of our building, which has become really a big part of it. This is one of his pieces on the inside of our building. And really, again, it's about gathering, and it's about people coming together and redefining the living room of downtown Calgary. So happy to talk about all of the changes we've had and how we position this as a place for everyone, young and old, and a huge asset for Calgary. This has become a big part of the fabric of our downtown, and I would say not only as a place to gather, but also increase the design discourse in the city and the expectation and the appetite for urban design and urban context. One thing about this building that I think was successful was it's not just about the interior spaces, which I'm showing here, but also about how it affects the exterior and how the programming of the libraries can extend out into the urban fabric, which is a real win for all of us and in all of Calgary. So glad to be here.
Yeah, I think I actually unmuted myself successfully. Thanks, Kate. So I'm struck by a couple of things. I've been in the Calgary Library. I was there last year, and I was just mesmerized. I couldn't get out of the place. I just couldn't get over it. And you know, Calgary, just saying, wouldn't necessarily be the city that most Canadians would identify with beauty. They would identify it with natural beauty and the mountains and the access to the mountains. But it's interesting to me that libraries, you know, all three of you are working on libraries that are where the design aesthetic is extraordinary. And I'm just interested in the process that you all have been going through. You're all in different phases of it: advocacy, design, financing, management. How do you manage to convince folks that investing in something as striking as this and prioritizing that is worth the investment? I'm wondering, Jonathan, if you want to talk about that as a designer, because I can't imagine you haven't had clients that said, "Oh no, we're not going to do it," and you've had to persuade them. How that goes.
There were definitely times in Austin where, you know, we would talk about a material and the library team would wonder aloud if that material was too nice to be in a library. And so, you know, I think it really took a lot of conversation. And the key with Austin was before we as architects, we always want to run and grab our sketchbook and start designing. And with this project, we got everyone in the room together, including the clients, and we set big goals for the project. And so the goal of being the best daylit library in the country, the goal of connecting people to the outdoors, and the goal of being a living room for Austin really gave us a roadmap then for the design of the project. And that's what led to the large atrium, all of the activity sort of swirling around it and creating all of that sort of community activity where it's almost like a city within a building.
Right. I mean, in my day, a lot of my time is advocating for new sources of revenue for municipalities, and particularly through COVID, cities are going, they don't have money for hardly nothing. And when they, even in the normal budgetary cycle, sure Kate is nodding her head, I'm sure she's been through it, and you go in front of councils and you try to get your budgets approved, and invariably, library line is something that people think generally they can cut. And actually, Kate, you're working in a province that I would say at the moment wouldn't be most friendly to municipal expenditure. So talk to us about the advocacy that you have to do to try to get the budget to get, I think it's Snowhead that designed your library, right? So these, it costs money. Beauty costs money. What kind of fights? I mean, I heard you at the cocktail party, you had to kind of advocate, but what about just getting the budget and then being committed to such a high quality building? How did that go?
Well, I think it's a great question, Mary, and I think actually these projects are on the shoulders of decades of work. So I think, I had the privilege of coming in 2013 and helping steward this project through to completion, but it came at literally decades of work prior to myself, from the librarians, from municipal councillors who were open to it, advocating on behalf of the library. And without that, this project wouldn't have happened. So in 2013, we actually had the good fortune of having full funding for the project. And part of that was because of the company I work for, and I'm not going to get into big detailed review of how we are funded, but we are a wholly owned subsidiary of the City of Calgary, and we have a tax base that is incented to create tax uplift in the area. We were one of the first in Canada to have a TIF model, which is common in the States, first time in Canada here. And so having that, and we financed part of the library to a tune of 70 million. So we were incented to have this community space for our area, and knew that it could become a draw for the district as well. So the funding question is huge, and on any of our projects, it's a long process, much longer than I think it should be. I think that's another panel discussion of how to actually advocate for good design and how to get the project on the go. But I think for us, in advocating for good design and how to get things, how to pay for things that look great, a part of our challenge, or our narrative when we started this project, wasn't that we wanted a ton of money for exceedingly amazing design. That would have not flown here at all. What we kept saying was we were going to build a beautiful space and a functional space, and it was also going to meet the budget. In fact, we came in $10 million under budget and early on this project. And when we set this goals, I think Jonathan's absolutely right. We knew our ambition was design excellence, but our comments were that that didn't have to come at the sacrifice of functionality or long-term sustainability operational. So we really tasked the team to work hard. We had a combination, it was dialogue locally, and then you're right, Snowhead working on the project. So, but constantly we were very, very focused on what to keep and what not to keep. And so there's moments in that project that are quite low cost, but the pieces that people see and touch are not. And that was really important to us. How to keep all the wood to make it feel warm and welcoming was really important, whereas the floors are really just concrete. And so it's about a decision. It's the macro, making sure we had the funding and had the vision and people to run it. I think one of the big things, and I'll close and let Margaret jump in too, but is that we had CMLC was able to drive it and make the decisions on behalf of the city. So it wasn't a cumbersome governance structure that had many people designed by committee, is a way to water down intent. Whereas when we were able to say, we know the ambition and let's deliver it. And that makes it a lot smoother and easier to deliver great quality, I think.
Are you the only TIF in Canada, the only TIF equivalent?
No, we're not now. We were the first in 2007. There are a few more in Edmonton and in Ontario now as well.
But in your view, that contributed to the difference because it gave you some leverage to be able to attract the capital you needed. And I know that it's the other thing that you mentioned, which is quite marvelous when you're in Calgary, is that the transit vehicle comes right into the building. It's very, very cool, the basement. So it feels to somebody who's just walked in that this was all the way it was supposed to be from the beginning. And as you say, it's as you suggest, it's not just a beautiful facility and amenity. It's actually integrated into the whole downtown that you're trying. And the other thing is through the pandemic, downtowns in Canadian cities, and I'm sure as true in the American cities, they're all being absolutely hard hit, devastated. And Calgary's been living with the downtown, been hollowing out for 7 years, 6 or 7 years. So they're ahead of this curve. And so the context in which we were creating this was during the downturn as the oil industry was collapsing. So it's all, these make the story all the richer, really.
It was the perfect timing to deliver something like this, and actually becoming a gathering place for those who needed actually public space, needed access to free computers. When people thought, oh, that wasn't necessary, everyone has their laptop. No, everyone doesn't have a laptop. And in fact, a healthy city needs to support those that don't have access to all of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Margaret, do you want to throw in? I know that beauty is part of practice, but you're also a process person, or as you say in America, a process person. And you have to cobble together all these different engagements. The slides you showed, and I know from watching you that you engage with all sorts of stakeholders when you're putting these things together. So do you want to comment a little bit about the challenges that your colleagues mentioned here?
Well, I think it's also a mindset shift. And the most public investment of honoring our communities is through that visible investment that we make in our public assets and our public institutions. And I think, Mary, even in your work with the Civic Commons, you all were introducing that mindset shift that we have these assets in our communities. We have these public library buildings, we have these parks, and with intentional investment, we can really activate and amplify their outcomes to build community wealth, to build trust and cooperation that build social capital and human capital. And we have to stop thinking of this frugality of really that scarcity model of starving the resources that are available to us to really activate and amplify the public good. And when we make that mindset shift, that aha moment goes off in our leaders, it goes off in our community members who realize that their tax dollars have an exponential impact to do amazing things for their community. So I think that mindset shift is something that really is of benefit to all of the work that we're doing. I also think that when you have leaders that have strong vision, it's vision, trust, and cooperation among the teams, and you prioritize your dollars in ways that they can be extended to have impact greater than what the physical space actually purchases. And I think that mindset for public work is really important as well. And when you are really focusing on a process, how am I saying it in Canada? Process?
That's
process. That is rooted and driven from the community, bringing the community together, building coalitions among your partners, you can really make a strong and clear justification for how that investment is going to benefit friends, families, neighbors in expanded ways and expanded roles. The outcome is greater than the sum of the parts that is the input. The opportunity that we have to generate public trust in our public institutions through the design process is of huge benefit to library institutions when they engage in a building process, in a building project.
Jonathan, do clients get in the way? I just know that designers always have an idea what they want to do, and then they've got to deal with the damn client.
Clients do not get in the way. Clients
that's a very good political answer there, Jonathan.
They're situated to understand what happens in their buildings. And I'll give you a few examples in Austin. So we worked very closely with the clients. Like we now have known each other a decade. We've spent thousands of hours together. We know what's happened in each other's families. But working with them, it gave me a whole different focus and sort of vision of what they have to deal with every day. I mean, these buildings are full of people, and people are really hard on buildings. And so early in design, when the client said, we should take all of the stone that we're looking at for the floor and find the deepest, darkest red wine and spill wine on all the samples and see how easy it is to clean up. I kind of thought they were insane, but seeing what happens in these buildings, and 2 years in, the stairs in that beautiful atrium that we put in to encourage everyone to take the stairs, everyone's been taking the stairs. So consequently, more people have probably walked up those stairs than every other Lake Flato project in the 35 years of the firm combined, and we've already had to refinish the stairs. So like going through and thinking through now, it's totally changed the way I look at sort of the durability of public space. And it can be beautiful, but you really have to think about the durability side of things. I also think just sort of tactically figuring out ways within these buildings, because the libraries typically sort of last on the list to get funded, anywhere where you can help the library pay for things is really great. So in Austin, we purposefully worked with them to look in their sort of business plan to hire a few people who would oversee sort of the programming of the space and the rentability of different spaces. And we purposefully designed the art gallery is not just an art gallery, it's a space where Google can have events and they can pay for those events after hours. The event forum that's usually used for city events can be used for weddings on the weekends and was used recently, I guess pre-COVID, for a prom. And that is actually paying back into the library, which normally is sort of last on the list. And so that's been really great to see happen and to give the library an ability to be a little more self-sufficient.
So I want to talk about that a bit, because I think one of the dilemmas, as I suggested, is that certainly most municipal governments are going to be dealing with remarkable austerity, I think, over the next 18 months, because they've had so many unexpected costs that they've had through COVID. And I'm curious about the business model that you're just hinting at. How do we, I'm sure all three of you are thinking about this, and I bet you are, Kate. Although I guess it's no longer your problem because you don't actually own the library. Do you now? Do you own the library? You developed it, but do you own it?
We do not own it. It's in our district, so we're directly tied to its success as our success for sure, but we're not directly the owner of it or the operator, which is a big point about when you're planning libraries, about planning not just for the capital costs, but for the ongoing operations. But no, we're not the operator.
So I guess this is a dilemma for libraries going forward. If you build a beautiful building, you leverage through a TIF the development cost. You can become the anchor institution that revitalizes the neighborhood. All those things, but actually going forward for libraries to be financially sustainable, can I just get a sense from maybe Margaret? Margaret, are you thinking also about this? About how do librarians and municipal councilors and city administrators that are now dealing with truncated budgets, thoughts on how a library can actually be financially sustainable? Jonathan hinted at it a bit. What do you think?
Well, we think about it all the time because after 2008, libraries, those of us who design libraries were just at a standstill waiting for the work to pick back up, and it started to pick back up in 2012. And one of the aspects of the work that we've gotten into with strategy is really understanding what is the business model of the public library so that we can be prepared and resilient. Now, most of the clients that I work with have been fairly stable even through this pandemic, and that's because, as Hugh Hardy, as you know, Hugh Hardy, my boss, Mary Rowe, said that the recession comes to public institutions later than it does to developers. So what I'm hoping we can do as a public library model is really embrace our current relative stability. I'm not saying that it's completely stable, but relative to small businesses, relative to developers, and prove how valuable we are very quickly, very tenaciously to foster the resiliency, to activate an equity-driven community economic development for our communities so that we can take advantage of alternate sources of funding through foundations, through banks, Community Reinvestment Act dollars, through the alternative funding sources that I think libraries can completely leverage so that the funding model is much more diverse and sustainable than it has typically been, which is primarily 80% through local tax dollars. So I'm hoping we can really embrace this time right now and be courageous and be tenacious and be active at proving how important we are going to be and already are at building resiliency and recovery, because we are our values and because we can organize communities, we can build the trust and cooperation that all of the panelists on many of the other sessions are saying is going to be a critical piece of.
I mean, it was interesting, when COVID hit, and Margaret knows this from my background, that I was in New Orleans after Katrina for 5 years, and what I saw was this need to create hubs and resilience hubs that were to form up in all sorts of idiosyncratic ways, people's garages, parking lots, various things. And as COVID was starting to loom here in Canada, we were looking carefully to say, well, where could those centers be? And there's a library a block from my house, and I don't have a relationship with that library. It doesn't have my email, doesn't have my cell phone. And you think, why? Like, why? That, and I'm wondering if this is one of the lessons we have to start thinking about is, do we now have to get uber intentional about this? Because who knows what the next crisis will be once we get over COVID? And is the library, in fact, not a civic institution that could, in fact, reach vast numbers of people? I called the director of Kitchener-Waterloo one couple of weeks in and said, is the city using your database to reach people? And they weren't. They hadn't yet. Kate, you're a land steward, and you have all sorts of options about what you develop. Do you have a thought on this? I mean, I don't know how many civic institutions you've actually been able to make happen in your current gig, but do you have a thought about this in terms of what going forward the priority it should be?
Well, I mean, I think it's a great question, Mary, about how do you first of all connect to your community, and how are you beyond just the physical bricks and mortar of any of these institutions? How do you then put your tentacles out into the actual users or the potential users is what I'd be more curious in. How do you attract or understand who's living here? So in East Village, just for context, our whole district is about 500 acres. The library is one of the buildings within the area. We also have Studio Bell, which is the National Music Center for Canada. And then what CMLC is delivering right now is also building an extension to our convention center and also a new arena/event center right now. So there's
that's all in your district.
Yes,
all in your district. You're a busy girl.
Yeah, I'm going to start getting hives if you re-emphasize it. But yeah, it's a busy time. But what's interesting about this time, doing all of this work and building places where people gather in a time when we cannot gather, is the repeated question. We've gone from why libraries to why gathering spaces as all my questions that we get asked, and they're very pertinent and valid questions. But one thing that we are doing as we're creating the teams to build out all of these projects is questioning what it is to gather, first of all, and what future gatherings look like. And I think none of us are ever going to have a crystal ball about what that looks like, but I think what we are looking at is the interface between all these large buildings. Perhaps an arena is always going to have a large bowl that has many seats in it, and they're not physically distanced. But what is really interesting to us now, and what happened in COVID in Calgary over the last few months, is how people sought the outdoors and sought the public space. We're really focusing, like we did with the library, about what the interface between these buildings really looks like, and the spaces between all of these larger community building projects, and what does the landscape. I think that the importance of urban design and landscape design becomes really critical to overall district success and public gathering space success. So really looking at that edge condition much more than we ever have before.
You know that book by Stuart Brand, The Space Between Buildings, I think, isn't it? You'll know better, I think, it's The Space Between Buildings. But this idea, as you suggest, this is why it's so interesting that CMLC has a different perspective, and you need different kinds of components. What about libraries as part of mixed development? Could people imagine? I'm trying to imagine a sporting facility that has a library in it. I was in Medellin, Colombia, for the World Urban Forum, and they have little bibliotheques in the transit stations. As you're about to get on the funicular to go up the mountains, there's a little bibliothèque there. You can take a book out and then get on the car going up in the air. So I'm just wondering, do you think that's in our future? Can we imagine? Because the dilemma right now is that you're building these, you're doing the Guggenheim Bilbao, like spectacular building. But what about modest libraries that could be tucked into a purpose-built apartment building, or I don't know, it could be at the back of where the Flames play. I don't know. Anybody else thinking that way about other ways to cite a library as part of a larger development?
I think libraries should be taking over the world.
Yeah.
They should be, I mean, how many, we all need third places. So the opportunity for the public library as a brand of being 100% devoted to the public good and to an individual's development to be full participants in society is unmatched. And it's limitless to being able to grow that. And so I think the it kind of goes back to our talking about, do we starve our resources or do we invest in them? And if
but you could have a coffee shop in there that generates some revenue, and maybe you could have a training school in there. And as Jonathan was suggesting, maybe you have a facility that's rented out for proms. Only in America do you talk about proms. Just we kind of know it in Canada. This idea that you could sort of combine into different kinds of places. Because I'm a little worried that we're going to create these iconic structures, and then 15 years from now we'll be over that. And then, and I don't. You don't want to keep. Hey, Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's about iconic structures. It's about the iconic nature of the atrium came about for the daylighting reason. And then the other notion that we haven't talked about that's so important is flexibility and future flexibility. And so building that flexibility in will mean that atrium and the areas around that atrium that all have raised floor where you can just pick up the floor and move the data and everything else around and move the stacks around and move the stacks in and out will really provide that. And also figuring out how to make the buildings themselves mixed use. I mean, the first 2 levels of Austin contain an art gallery, an event center, a connection to an urban creekway, a bookstore that is owned by the library but could be rented out for future uses on 2nd Street, and a 5,000 square foot cafe that's cooking literary themed things but could be replaced by something in the future. And so figuring out how to make that building really tie in and be this mixed use, almost like city within a city, I think has huge potential. And I could see that carrying to other places in the library. Like Austin has a homeless assistance center that's run by a third party inside the library. And creating that inherent flexibility, because we all don't know, or at least I don't, what a library is going to be in 20, 30, 50 years. So making sure that we give a platform that the city embraces and loves, but that they can themselves decide and change. And it's sort of an open source platform for them.
So one thing, also poetic. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I think you're exactly right. The Calgary Library has retail and theater spaces within it as well. But I think what the Calgary Public Library as a system is moved towards is, there's partnerships, and I think that's where you really amplify your voice. They're partnered with the YMCA, other developers doing mixed use combinations. So actually the more common library model to be delivered in Calgary recently has been in conjunction with a YMCA and having it kind of side by side in a kind of a mini version, to Margaret's point, kind of have one everywhere. And it's a lot more accessible, great for dropping off your books when you're going to swimming lessons and etc. It just works with people and how we live. So I hope that catches on and carries on.
And so it's sort of around the corner on this. Oh, go ahead, Margaret. You want to jump in? Go ahead, Margaret.
What got me excited about what Jonathan was speaking to also is, I think one of the the maturest form of a public library is really when it's owned by the community. And so the opportunity to think about us as public place forecasters or futurists to create the strategic, flexible framework in the facilities so that they can be responsive in real time to what the community's goals and aspirations are. And one of our projects in Columbia, South Carolina, we designed a culinary center. And after it was open for a year, we learned that they wanted actually more crafting areas. So you could take that same model of a messy maker area and it could just be inherently transformed by the community because it was still a messy space and it was still designed for project-based learning. So understanding the consistencies of the human condition, that we enjoy places for gathering, we enjoy places for dreaming, we enjoy places for working. Those consistencies have the future future casting model, and the tools that we bring to those spaces give it the real-time variety.
Mm-hmm. We're also thoughtful about what you're saying. I'm glad this is being recorded and people will be able to look at it again and again going forward. I'm wondering if we could talk about one sort of serious topic remaining. Are you still there, folks?
We're here.
Yep.
We're here. Yep. We can hear you. We see you.
I have lost my camera.
We can see
Anybody
you.
else?
Keep going.
You're on. So everyone can see you.
Are you back? Was I the only one that took a little LSD trip there? Sorry about that. Could be the internet connection. The last thing I wanted to talk about was a more serious sort of ending topic, which is this. We're 4 white people of privilege here talking about this. And I know that libraries, if they really truly are the new public square, then they sure as hell shouldn't be looking like us.
Mm-mm.
And I also know that one of the challenges with libraries is that over time, more people that have no option end up in the library. And that has caused tension with other users. And so I'm curious from your side, how do you imagine the transition to happen where it can be the library for everyone, and that it would become that public square with a lot of diversity and inclusion and welcoming, and it wouldn't be dominated by one particular class or race or segment of society? Jonathan, you go first.
Sure. I think for Austin, we just early on set a goal that we were going to try and make the most sort of a welcoming space for everybody, and what we called a democratic space. And it was really about creating spaces that were dignified and durable and beautiful and flexible. And there had been some recent libraries when we were kicking off that had done some things like make bathrooms purposefully uncomfortable and create spaces of discomfort to discourage certain people from spending a lot of time in there. And in Austin,
Wow.
we really wanted to create an open, welcoming environment. And that also went to the sort of atrium itself and the ability to see what's happening. And everyone is sort of out in the open for the most part. There are more introverted spaces. But I think that sort of visibility has been really helpful. And there's the mix of people that are coming to that library is significantly greater than the previous iteration.
Mm-hmm.
Kate.
I would agree. I think our library folks that participated in the project, their mantra was a place for everyone. And it's easy to say that, but I think Jonathan touched on it earlier as well, as it's about also flexibility. What is everyone in 2013 versus what is everyone today? It should have been the same, but frankly, it really wasn't the thinking. And even after Truth and Reconciliation here in Canada, that came out midway through design or towards the end of our design, was something that we needed to adapt to and make sure that we incorporated the Indigenous perspective in the library. And as you pointed out, coming from a fairly Caucasian group of designers and oversight, it needed to be something that the team responded to. So it was something that was brought into the project in a fulsome way, but towards the end. And I think there'll be more of that we become more aware of as we can see from 2020 with Black Lives Matter and Me Too and all the rest. I think that these spaces need to be inclusive, but they also need to be adaptive to be inclusive. I think the library did a great job in terms of a ceremonial religious space within the building. There's also an ability to do smudge ceremonies in the space, and a consideration for gender fluidity, everything else. But I think all of these topics really speak to adaptability and making sure that it truly is open to everyone. If you understand where you've made faults in the past and not even knowing what you hadn't included. So I think some humility in the design and the delivery and the adaptive use of the building is really, really critical.
Great. I'm going to give the last word to you, Margaret, and just aware that my video keeps cutting out and the participants are telling you to see and hear me, so I better behave, but I won't be able to see any of you, but I can stay in for the last comment to you, Margaret, and then I want to thank Jonathan and Kate and Margaret. What an important topic this is. Margaret, last word to you about libraries and Square.
It is our call to action. The commitment that the library industry has to make to racial justice, social justice, it is our most critical call to action. There's work that the library industry has to do. There is work that the design industry has to do. We did a presentation at the Public Library Association in February about the process of inclusive design, how critical it is to be open and accepting of the voices that we are engaging in. And I presented to the librarians that the architecture industry is 2% people of color as registered architects. And I think the reckoning that we all have to make about the lived experiences that we are bringing to the design process, we have to let go of benchmarks and standards and methodologies of design processes that are perpetuating systemic injustices, and be aware that we have to change the way we hire fellow designers. Library directors, I think, need to be aware of the way that they need to write RFPs to expand the lived experiences of their designers. And it is the roll up our sleeves hard work that all of us need to do in order to honor our communities and really recognize that inclusive design and inclusive experiences is going to take intentional hard work, particularly in land use development, because if you look at the way America has been developed and the way our libraries and our schools have been located, equity is easy, but inclusivity is going to take significant intention. And to your point, Mary, we have had experiences with public libraries where the mixing of contemporary inclusive communities sometimes does create contradictions, and I think it takes a significant amount of courage of leaders to know that that may happen, but it's the right thing to do in order to build on the strength of the diversity of this America that's going to be the most. I mean, what a great and we can add North America, but what a great privilege it is for our children's generation to be in this mixing pot, and so we have the responsibility to prepare communities for inclusivity and the strength of diversity.
I think Mary's gone dark again. Mary, can you hear us?
Folks, I've lost the feed, and so I think you may be able to still hear me, and I'm hoping I'm not cutting Margaret off because you were on a really beautiful roll there. I just want to thank again Jonathan, Kate, and Margaret for being part of this, and for I'm back, and for the call to action that you just provided. So you're inspiring for me, and I know the sessions get viewed again and again. Onwards, we keep doing and do it better, do it more inclusively. So thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Margaret. Really great to be with you for this hour, and I hope you have a good weekend in the snow, in the heat, and in the humidity. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mary. Appreciate it. Great to see you, Jonathan.
Bye-bye.
Margaret.